Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review episode 4 of Sweet Tooth. So, really, kind of disclaimer from the last review. I did not actually cover something in the last review. Because I felt, honestly, looking back on it, after I was finished reviewing, I kind of felt like the review of that episode for a bulk of it was complete. And there was kind of this tail end of the episode that I really and honestly and truly it didn't matter. Really to me, I don't think that it really mattered that I talked about it, but people might have gotten people might have been like, hey, why didn't he cover the tail end of the episode? I don't know, it felt that I was assuming or assessing that what was happening at the tail end of that episode was going to be covered in this episode, and it didn't at all. So I'm like, well, that sucks. Because I thought, the main reason for me not mentioning that was for it to have a much more prominent story in this episode, which it didn't. So, man, was that just a crappy thing. Because on the tail end of the last episode, we have a guy named General Abbott who is involved in orchestrating and planning the guys in the yellow jumpsuits to go and plan things out and orchestrate. He's like the leader of the last man, or kind of the guys that I call the yellow jumpsuits, or the yellow rain suits. But evidently those men are actually called the last men. Evidently from what I've heard through this episode. So, yeah, I didn't cover the General Abbott stuff. I didn't really care because I didn't think, it was crucially important to either that episode, or it might not have had any real true effect on this episode, and it didn't. So, going with this episode, we really have this episode mostly focused on the animal army, which I was very excited about. I was also technically right about Amy. Here's my thing here. I know a lot of people might be thinking that I'm watching ahead, or I'm kind of looking through any of the images to really try to understand where this story is going. I'm actually not. I'm not going out of my way to really go and find out more about this show, besides the little things here and there about every little. So a lot of these predictions are not just because I've seen an episode ahead, or because it's not that at all. I could care less about going in and trying to watch the next episode of this one to kind of see where the next episode is heading. I just want to do these and have it be very fresh, and I hope everyone understands that. That, if I were to make a prediction about an episode, it's not because I saw the next episode. It's just because I just so happen to go, oh, hey, yeah, I guess I easily figured out what happened here. So really, this episode mainly concentrates on the animal army, and it also is to showcase a little bit more of Amy, and I was right about where her story was going to progress. We do have some more things going on with Aditya and Ronnie. It seems that there is some nosy neighbor named Nancy that it seems they're having quite a bit of dialogue with in this episode. If you guys remember, Nancy is the one that red flagged the other guy in the other episode and had his house basically burnt down. So in this episode, we have kind of Nancy, who is kind of being just in people's freaking noses. She's being the nosiest freaking neighbor you could possibly have, to where I'm starting to wonder if Aditya and Ronnie are eventually going to separate themselves from this neighborhood and go and be on their own. which will be horrible for this town because Aditya is like the only doctor there. So maybe they're just gonna have to tie him to a chair and force him to be a doctor. But I don't know. I don't know exactly where this story is heading, but like I think that Aditya is starting to realize how harmful um, it really is being here. I'm kind of wondering if Aditya at some point is going to establish like really just treat people like utter garbage just because he's like, dude, I'm the only doctor here. Like, I'm the only doctor here. You need to freaking treat me better, or like, there's gonna be some consequences. I will leave you guys here to rot. And you better be better to me. You better not be nosy as F within my life because I am your only chance at survival. But Aditya is kind of this nice doctor, and like he just kind of is just kind of like is really good in this episode. But if anything, the more focus is on Animal Army. It's on Gus, and it's also to find out even more about Tommy. Which thumbs up for that. Uh, if anything, really, I was kind of making the consensus that Tommy was quite possibly having some kind of, because he was an athlete and like I was stereotypically like thinking where he was going to go in this story. Like I was surprisingly like, in this episode we kind of have like some story here showcased. But with that said, I think I'm going to try to get into spoilers now, just because really there's a lot of interesting things going on in spoilers. Visually, this episode is freaking amazing. Like, there's a lot of great visual things going on in this episode, especially when Animal Army is to showcase their hideout. That looks really awesome. Eventually, visually, where this episode goes into, like, I was just really impressed. So if we had very simplistic visuals in other episodes in times before, with the exclusion of maybe the market, like this kind of makes up for it. This kind of like gets kind of interesting visually. But some people might have said that like, well, that's not a visual explosion. Like I'm trying to play it off as. No, I'm saying just visually, it looks really interesting in this episode. There was like a lot of complicated times where I'm like, I don't know what to use for a thumbnail. But I keep trying to have Gus in the thumbnail. Is kind of my plan. Like it's not like one of those where it's like, oh yeah, use the hybrid as a thumbnail. Like I could have easily gone and used like the Animal Army in this thumbnail. I could have easily used General Abbott in the last one. I could have easily started to have a rotation of whatever. But I don't know. Every single time I kind of go here, I just end up using Gus somewhere as some visual, just because I kind of see something. I'm like, how about I just pick that one as the visual? Like, it just so happens to be Gus. Like, I'm not making the plan of it being Gus. But with that said, I think it's about that time to go into, yeah, because I do these like way ahead of time. There's sometimes where I even go and do thumbnails before I even watch a film. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna pick this visual here. Like there's sometimes where I go through other apps and find this movie or find this show or find whatever, and then I kind of scroll through the episode or I kind of scroll through the movie like on mute, of course, and then like pick what image stands out the most, and that's where you get the thumbnails from. So huzzah for that. But with that said, it's time to go into here and go out of our way to say it is now spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time again to spoil this episode. Well, as per usual, I tend to leave the Gus and the Tommy and even now the Animal Army story usually towards the end. Just because there's a couple of like small side things going on that seem honestly just like something to just kind of get that out of the way and then get to the continuous Gus and Tommy adventure. So really, I'm just going to keep to that pattern, and I hope nobody hates this review because I keep doing it that way. There's reasons. Those stories are short, but it is what it is. So, spoilers now. So, in the very beginning of my askewed review, so I'm going to go into the Amy stuff first because really it's been in a episode or two since we've had anything with Amy, so let's push her to be first. So, we have Amy who, like I said in previous review, Amy has had her little piglet grow up. Her piglet has aged quickly. I'm like, well, yeah, that's because they don't want to deal with like baby stuff. Like, I think like they try to age kids really quickly in a lot of shows and a lot of movies. People will understand that just because like, yeah, we don't want to really go through a lot of the baby stuff. Plus, also, again, you kind of don't know exactly the timeline of all of these stories. So eventually, they can kind of easily transition that or make this girl look as old as they need to, because if anything, they normally say that for shows and for movies that they tend to not want to deal with animals very much, like real actual animals, or babies, or just really young kids, because it's very difficult to try to shoot all that stuff. Um, but yeah, like that's why a lot of times you'll probably see a CGI'd animal instead of an actual animal, just because they don't want to deal with that arduous process of having to have an actual animal that they have to like have perfectly trained to do everything that they want. That's why you see a lot of CGI'd animals now, because they're taking the lazy way out in all brutal honesty. So, speaking of CGI, so we are to have Amy, who is eventually going and uh, in kind of planting and going through this zoo, and eventually asking Wendy, who is her daughter, the little piglet baby that we saw earlier, is now grown up to a much older Wendy. We have Amy who is asking Wendy about like, hey, have you taken some carrots? Like, have you like? So we have Wendy who is obviously lying about it, but like, I think really, Amy thinks that it's for good reason. Maybe she was just extra hungry one day, but also we eventually have them eating, and when the food is seemingly uh, to just be like put away, thrown in the trash, or to be uh, whichever, we have Wendy who is skirting off to eventually take this dish and dump it off to the side of these plants and then run off. So we're kind of like, okay, what is exactly going on here? There has to be some connection with all of this. And it can't just be like, oh, just put the extra food into all the plants and use it as some kind of like uh, fertilizing something or other. So we eventually have Amy, who is to eventually hear a sound in her zoo. And she has to go investigate it, and she is to have a shotgun out. So it seems that Wendy is eventually going with her mother to see what the sound is. And so we have Amy, who is to eventually go through this part of the zoo to eventually see this shaking of brush. And so we have Amy, who is almost going to shoot at whatever this is. And so Wendy has to say, no, don't do it. He's my friend. And so we end up noticing that there is another hybrid that pops out, and his name is Bobby, I believe. And so Bobby is to pop out, and so we have Wendy that immediately asks her mother, it's like, well, can we keep him? Like, well, technically, I don't know how long that they have had this other hybrid here, so like, might as well just keep Bobby here anyways. So we have Wendy, who has now decided to make this zoo the preserve. So Amy was the person that I guess has been sending out all these flyers for the hybrid preserve since episode 1, and we didn't realize that until now. Like, I'm like, wow, like that's kind of a really interesting connection that we've made there, that like we didn't know Amy was actually responsible for the whole like hybrid reserve, how they were trying to save the hybrids. And I was like, wow, that's kind of very interesting how we get that connection finally, which I thought was fascinating. So now we should go and skirt on into the Aditya story. So we are to have Nancy, who is the nosiest freaking neighbor, and it's not her fault. It's the script. It's the script's fault. I blame the script. So we have Nancy, who strolls in and is asking Aditya, "Oh, hey, yeah, like, how's Ronnie today? Like, how is she doing?" And so like, is she doing well today? Like, it seems like I don't see her today. And Aditya's like, well, yeah, like, if anything, me and her had like a champagne party last night and celebrating our anniversary, and she's kind of sleeping things off. That actually, from Aditya, is actually a lie. So we eventually go on to have Aditya, who is going to work and going and evidently needing more supplies. And so eventually Aditya is to read Dr. Bell's research, and it is to mention that they actually have to send flares out if they need certain things. Which I think that this episode, the title of it is actually called Secret Sauce. And so, like, I'm like, okay, how is that going to play into this episode? Because every single episode name has to play into the episode, I guess. I just figured that out. Especially when, like, every time I would start seeing every episode, like, oh yeah, like, I guess every single title of the episode works its way into every single thing. So we have Aditya, who is to fire off a flare and to, I guess, need supplies, so like someone can spot that and be like, oh, so they need more of the secret sauce, which who knows what the heck that is. Aditya is still talking about the abnormal way of doing things. Ronnie had talked to Aditya about the research that they need, and Ronnie is quite possibly talking to Aditya about the research that they have done. And Ronnie is mentioning that it seems like they need a live hybrid to be able to help cure this illness, but where exactly can you find a live hybrid right now? It's a very rare thing. Like, it's a rare species. It's almost extinct. I'm assuming at some point that we are probably going to have a number of things probably happen. Maybe Aditya is going to eventually leave with Ronnie and maybe connect with Amy because they'll find out that there is a reserve. Or really eventually Gus could stumble into any point in time of any place or whichever. And so, like, I'm assuming with how these flyers are eventually going out to everybody about this whole reserve-like thing, we could probably have Aditya, who ends up going and traveling to wherever the heck Amy is, to go and eventually find a hybrid, so that way they can get this medication to help all of these people. And maybe that's how the show will play out. I don't know. I haven't seen any of the other episodes. So I want to stress that as much as possible. So we have Aditya, who shoots out a flare, and so we have him come back home after his long doctrine of work. And so we have him home to see that Nancy is talking to Ronnie, and we can just see in like Aditya's face where it's just like, oh my god, I'm like, this woman just won't stop. So we have Nancy who is talking to Ronnie, and so Nancy's like, you know what? Like, I think I mentioned this to Ronnie, but I'm also going to mention it to you. Like, I honestly think that we should actually double up or triple up on testing people to see if everyone's okay in this town. I'm like, Aditya's like, no. Like, if anything, we're going to overkill on our testing supplies and run out of that fairly quickly. But on top of that, like, if anybody actually shows actual symptoms, then we test, then we check, then we burn their house down, then we murder them. Basically, because of how horrible that we are with this neighborhood where we just kill people off and burn down their houses, I guess. But anyways, so we have Nancy who is to be like, well, yeah, like that might sound like an overuse of resources. And so Nancy starts to walk off, but then she like kind of skews back, and then she's like, well, like I hope Ronnie, like you're recovering well after that anniversary party that you and Aditya had. Like I hope you're having some really well I hope you're going to recover from that hangover that you've had the night before. And Ronnie's like, so what now? And then she's like, oh yeah, like, yeah, I get what you're saying. Like, I'm a little bit of a head fog because of all the drinking that I did last night. Lie. And so Nancy is like, aha, yeah, so you motherfuckers lied. So we have Nancy who is to start walking out of the apartment to have Nancy who is to be stopped by Aditya. And so we have Nancy who all of a sudden is getting hit by Aditya's horse. Like, the horse is dropping its back legs and surprising Nancy with getting kicked. And so Nancy falls over. And so we just have Aditya and Ronnie who is dragging Nancy into their home. And I'm like, oh my god, this is insane. Like, are they gonna strap her? Like, are they gonna tape her and then burn the house down and just say like, yeah, we found out like Nancy was sick. That's why she was trying to ping on everybody about being sick, because her herself was sick, and like we found out, so we had to decide to plastic wrap her and burn her alive in the house. Like, it's a horrible thing that we had to do, but I think that's what they have to do in this instance. Because I'm assuming that Nancy is probably, if they let her go, Nancy is going to spill some kind of something. But on top of that, Nancy is probably like she's a nosy neighbor, and that's not going to go away. So they have to figure out how to make her go away, sadly. And plus, also, there's very few episodes left. So now it's time for the Gus and Tommy Adventure. Sadly enough, it seems like Tommy isn't in much of this episode, because there's a whole reason for that. So we have both Gus and Tommy, who were again rescued by the animal kingdom via the market. And so we have the animal kingdom, the animal army. I want to say the animal kingdom, but it's the animal army. We have the animal army who is to go and retrieve both Gus and Tommy. And so at first we have the AA want to go and just kill Tommy right then and there. But we have Gus who is defending Tommy and just saying, no, like, you will not kill him. Like, do not. Like, do not, like, and so, like, we have this sweet moment where Gus is consistently in this episode trying to save Tommy's life. And, like, it's kind of interesting how Tommy kept wanting to pull the ejector seat between the relationship between Gus and Tommy. But it seems like finally in this episode, Gus has kind of probably proven that, you know, it is probably good to have a hybrid around every once in a while because eventually he will save your life. So we have the animal army who just decides to go and put Tommy into this garage and tie him up to try to figure out eventually what they are going to do with him. Because even though Gus is saying do not kill him, the animal army is just saying, well, yeah, but he has killed many of hybrids and he has killed many of people. And so, like, in this world, it probably has been kill or be killed, but still. Because eventually Bear, or the leader of the army, uh, is to see Tommy's tattoo, and we're gonna get that. I'm gonna put a pin in that, and we're gonna get to that. So let's talk about the army and the Gus stuff. So we have Gus going to the army's headquarters, and so we have Gus who doesn't know how to act with these people. Like, he's just kind of like he's literally a deer in the headlights. Because he antlers, deer, yeah. So he kind of doesn't know how to act with these people. And so we have Bear who's telling Gus, is like, hey, just go to them and just be nice. Like, if anything, like, I'm sure they'll fall in love with you fairly easy. So we have Gus who's like, hi, and then everybody just swarms him and they're like, oh my god, he can talk. Because everybody doesn't understand how this hybrid can talk and, like, talk well and whichever. Everyone is very confused because they've never seen a hybrid that talks before. Evidently, like, this episode feels very much like a Howard the Duck kind of situation, if anything. And I'm kind of waiting for there to be, like, a duck hybrid, and for me to just like, hey, Howard the Duck! But that will probably not happen. Because I'm assuming that, like, if we're going to get a hybrid, like, the hybrid is probably going to have a bill, but it's going to have, like, a human face. So that'll probably be what it'll be like, to have, like, a duck hybrid here. But it is what it is. So we have, like, we have everybody who is just like, yeah, like, let's bum rush Gus and, like, give him all kinds of things. And, like, we have them, like, showing him things that he has never been able to do before. Like, eat, like, candy. Evidently, there was this one kid who had this, like, horrible-looking teeth, but it ends up happening the way it ends up happening when you eat, evidently, a ton of chocolate, and that's all you eat, because that's all you have left, I guess, in this world. So we have this kid ask Gus, hey, have you ever eaten candy before? And so Gus is like, no, I don't know exactly what you mean by that. And so we have this kid giving Gus these, like, gummy worms, and like, yeah, man, like, go and eat candy for once. Because I'm sure you just had, like, apples and syrup and whatever the heck, like, trees probably at some point, like, branches of trees, salads and whatever. So we have Gus who eats this gummy worm for the first time, and so he's like, oh my god, that tastes like lightning. And he's like, what is that? And he's like, a sour gummy worm. And so he's like, oh wow, that's great. So we push on. So we have Gus who is to eventually go and see what see what a computer is, because he's never seen a computer before. And so he goes in there and discovers that, like, you can do, like, video games on there. And so we have one of the people in the computer who is generating a person that looks just like Gus. And so Gus is kind of not understanding the whole video game concept. He's like, well, why would anybody want to be like me? Like, why would anybody want to, like, like why would anybody want to like do this kind of thing? And it's because like they're like, well, yeah, it's our fun, like it's fun. And so Gus is like, so we push on. So we also have Bear asking Gus like, well, have you ever drove anything before? And Gus doesn't have an answer, but we immediately have them doing bumper cars. And so Gus is just kind of smashing into everybody, having a lot of fun. And so we eventually have everybody all stop and all start watching a movie. And so we have Gus talking to Bear. And so this is where Bear is starting to manipulate Gus. Where Bear is trying to get Gus to stay here and not leave. Trying to win him over so badly because they want him to stay with this animal army because it makes sense. Like people in numbers will work much better, and plus Gus is just another number to them. Even though technically Gus could be, for the animal army, the hybrid ambassador when the animal army is to see another hybrid. Like, hey, we have another hybrid here. Like, and these people are trying to protect the hybrids. So, yeah, like, it's like he could be the hybrid ambassador, which is weird, but it is what it is. So, we have Bear, who is trying to mention that Tommy is wrong for Gus to be with, because there's only one real reason why a man like Tommy would have a hybrid with him, and it's probably just to sell him off. So, because Bear is trying to let Gus realize that Tommy isn't who he seems. Tommy is actually a last man. Tommy was one of the men that were to wear yellow jumpsuits because he has the mark on his chest. And so we're to find out, I'm like, man, I was thinking right away, I'm like, was Tommy like a hitman for hire or something? And then and then we find out this, I'm like, well, that actually perfectly works out. Yeah, figures, since obviously with Tommy's size, but it was just the fact that I'm like, well, no, this guy really is very emotionless now, so I'm assuming that this guy has had to kill numerous things, and it really I don't know what it is with Tommy, it easily convinces you that this isn't a happy-go-lucky guy, and now we understand why. It could just be Nonso, or the actor that is just playing. Maybe he usually plays that kind of role, but still, I was just kind of trying to figure out Tommy in this whole instance. So we push on to have Gus talk with Tommy, because we have Gus who wants to hear from Tommy's mouth himself. I keep calling Tommy Tommy, and I think they always go via his last name. Especially in this episode, they call him via his last name. But really, if anything, if people don't know who Tommy is, or any number of these people, well, I'm sorry, but because maybe whichever with how I talk about these episodes, people should know who these people are. When I'm like, well, Gus and Tommy, they've had their adventure together. Basically, have Gus, who basically becomes the Frodo in this instance, and we sadly have Tommy, who's like the Samwise Gamgee, who's not carrying Gus, but he's just the sidekick, sadly. He comes in and he beats everybody up, but like Sam did in the later Lord of the Rings movies. But yeah, like sadly, Tom in this story is kind of the Samwise Gamgee in this story. So pushing on, so we have Gus who is to push. I don't know why I say that, but it is what it is. We have Gus who's going to Tommy into the garage, and so we see Tommy who is strapped into this chair. We have Tommy mention at some point that like, hey, if you let me free, like I'm gonna take all of you. Like Tommy is just like, dude, I'm not here to play. Like it seems like you guys are like you guys have the numbers on me, but that doesn't mean jack crap nothing because look at the other episode where he just freaking takes a numerous amount of group down and they had guns and what do any number of these people have? Uh, a bone helmet. I don't think any of them really legitimately to me are that much of a threat, but they might have like karate skill. That's what it seems like their stats are. But if anything, I'm sure they could be really intimidating when the numbers are up. So we have Gus who is talking to Tommy, and Bear is establishing, look at this tattoo. Last men get these tattoos. And so Gus is like Tommy, is it true? Like, were you a last man? And Tommy convinces these people, it's like, yeah, like, when the chips are down, like, anybody will just have to forcibly do anything to survive. Like, I'm sure that my hands, who have been bloody, have been just as bloody as yours. So you can call me a killer, you can call me a murderer, but you are the exact same thing as me. Like, it was just on the opposite spectrum at one point in time. Tommy hasn't killed anyone recently that was actually a hybrid, that was actually a part of the animal army. We have it to where Tommy has, for the most part, become a person that is actually on the technical right side for this story. So we really have it to where Gus also mentions to all these army people, like, hey guys, like, if anything, you took down those guys at the market, so how are you any different than Tommy? Like, I have seen you kill people myself. And so how are you any different than Tommy? And so we have Tommy who is to go on trial. And so we have Bear who is on one side and we have Tiger who is on another. And so we had Bear who was to tell Gus before this that she was going to cross her heart and all kinds of business to keep Tommy safe. And so we have Bear who, while Gus and Tommy was talking, I think that's when Bear was kind of convinced that she was going to try to do the right thing with this. So we have Tommy who is kind of tied up, and so they are unlocking this truck container that has a tiger in it. This tiger is really wild and really crazy. We have Gus who is trying to calm this tiger down, I guess, like animal to animal. I guess Gus was going to try to talk to this tiger and say, don't hurt my friend. And so we have the tiger who bizarrely just calms down and just kind of backs away. And they eventually close the container because I guess the tiger, they didn't know if the tiger was going to get released or not. Because eventually Bear comes up and is like, you know what? I've made the decision that the fate of Tommy has changed from death to letting him live. Because if anything, he has shown that the time with us, that he has changed his ways, that he has realized like that hybrids should be saved as well as people that were on the opposite end of him. And so we have Bear letting Tommy go, and Tiger is like, no, like, if anything, like, this man killed a hybrid one time or another, so we have to, because we are the animal army, kill this man. And so now we have the animal army going with Tiger, and Bear is starting to feel like, wow, like everybody's turning on me. Like, what am I doing here? And so we just have Tommy and Gus who are just running off as both Bear and Tiger are having this quarrel together. So I'm naturally assuming that at some point Bear is probably going to end up with Tommy and Gus because the Animal Army had decided to go their own route. And I'm guessing here on out, the Animal Army is basically a enemy of maybe Gus and Tommy, just because maybe they're gonna see them and just be like, oh, like those are the people that, like, hybrid or not, more than likely that's probably going to cause some ruckus in the story. So with that said, I think I did cover everything. It'll be interesting if Bear does turn to being with this group. And I think also Bear's actual name is actually Mandy, I believe. So maybe she will ditch her Bear name to eventually be Mandy at some point. Uh, so eventually they might have to switch the IMDb when eventually that happens, because every single time I watch this episode, the IMDb drastically changes. I don't know why. Maybe they're watching it along as I am and they're correcting things or changing things. I don't know. I don't really understand. There's a lot of times where IMDb is crap and it doesn't have a good enough cast list or whatever. But that's just IMDb's prerogative, and eventually they're like, well, hey, like if anything, like we're getting like the cast list, like we're doing edits every single day of movies and shows. I'm sure they have a million things to comb through, so it's really hard for any numerous new things that come out that they have to IMDb cover, but also like some of the stuff that they have to make edits on as well, when eventually they realize that things have adjusted or changed or whichever. But with that said, I think that I've covered everything in this episode, plus I took way too effing long to cover it, so I'm going to get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.